evaluating a Postgres AI Enterprise Edition. And the big thing on that, especially with helping explain existing plans, is there's a session sharing feature, which could be quite useful. We are working on, well, actually, we've communicated the usefulness of the database scope labels in engineering weekend review. We've added some updates to the database review guide. We've separated them out. They used to be buried, now they're top level with other review guides. We do have database office hours. They are alternating APAC and EMEA time. So take a look at the team calendar. If you need any help or are stuck, please jump in there. And our database reviewers and maintainers are always quite helpful in there. And then there was another issue similar to this about staying informed about process and database land. There was a good conversation there, and we had a few action item follow-ups. So lots of good information, and we'll keep trying to improve and keep iterating on it.
Thanks, Craig. Lots of great information there. Looks like Elliot, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. So we had a problem. We had a problem that really kind of came to a boil last milestone with slow and flaky pipelines and the impact that was having. So we were using, our pipelines were taking 45 minutes, maybe an hour. We were having intermittent failures. And because we were using merge trains, this all just compounded. And so sometimes you'd click merge, or maintainer would click merge, and we weren't getting the failure notice for 4 or 5 hours because of something that would come up. And so it caused a lot of headaches, a lot of frustration, especially towards the end of the milestone. And so we have an issue open here to kind of dive in and like explore kind of all facets of it and do some improvements. So the biggest improvement just came by enabling automatic retries if the pipeline failure was caused by like a system failure, like failing to pull a Docker image or network issue or something like that. So that's had probably the biggest impact in stability. There's some additional work going on to do more parallelization with DAG. Like we're already using it, but you know, we can probably dive a bit deeper into that. And then taking advantage of some like more language and platform specific features, like using Go cache to reduce the overall set of tests needed, maybe not on merge, but on the average pipeline. And doing something like caching dependencies, but for that, that's a fairly new feature in Go, and so we need to do a language bump. So we haven't hit that one yet. There's been some other things we experimented with that didn't have any impact, but those are always really interesting too, because you think they're going to, and then you learn they don't. So because we have a Windows test environment, some of our tests, we did some tweaks there, learned a lot, didn't get much of a yield from the pipeline improvement though. So yep, things are going well, but we'll continue to kind of keep chipping away because I think there's always a bit more.
Great, thanks, Elliot. Jerome, I think you're up next.
Yeah, so our improvement was to expand telemetry tooling and work towards eventually deprecating the telemetry review process. So in terms of expanding tooling, we've worked on adding more usage ping counter methods for summing and averaging counters, along with building out tracking methods for using Snowplow. We've also added telemetry office hours, which are going to be hosted on the second Tuesday of every month. So we invite everyone to join if you have any questions about how to implement more tracking. We expect most of this tooling work to be completed by the end of Q3, and then we're going to be deprecating that process at the start of Q4. So it's a little bit further out than our original timeline, but throughout this month, we've been able to further spec out exactly what we want to build.
Okay, thanks, Jerome. And Joanna, I think you have the last follow-up from 13.0.
Yep, so just following up on some corrective actions that we had from an RCA from an incident where we're getting 500 errors on CI job artifact uploads at scale. We've added a new CI/CD core platform label that identifies issues that require domain expert review. And also there are guidelines around when to use that label. Next steps include some work between infrastructure and QA to mirror GitLab and GitLab QA from production to staging. We'll run master pipelines regularly to simulate the load in staging. And then also there's going to be follow-up feature flag training for the engineers.
Cool. All right, thanks so much for all those updates. Let's jump into the next section, what went well in 13.1. And I think, Crystal, you have the first item.
Yeah, so we had some really great examples of collaboration happening on the health team in 13.1. Something the health team does very well is break tasks down into iterative components. And we've talked about that in previous retrospectives around how we use feature flags. So a lot of these small iterations we do are possible because we have a high degree of involvement from our product manager and our product designer, Sarah and Amelia. And so as we've been working on these new product categories, there's a lot of pre-planning work that's necessary. The demand is really high on those two team members. And so the small tasks that we have, we're able to coordinate between front end and back end teams very easily across time zones. Several team members leverage some kind of time zone handoff where development and review can happen around the clock. And then also the teams become very intentional about where and when design review needs to happen so that we're reserving the capacity of our designer to plan the next phase. So just a lot of good collaboration in general in 13.1.
Nice. That sounds like a great way to optimize by taking advantage of our time zone distribution. Cool. So Stephen, I think you're up next. Could you tell us a little bit about Patroni?
Yes, sir. We had a long-running issue out to update, get off of Rep Manager, which is sort of the old solution that we've been using with Omnibus for Postgres replication and fault management. But we had learned through the course of this project that Rep Manager wasn't going to support Postgres 12, so it put some pressure on us to get Patroni working. It was a large change that required quite a bit of research on the front end, and then the call out here is on the collaboration aspect, right? Hussein over in Australia was the DRI for the change, but he ended up working with several other folks, both on our team and with others, to get the context that he needed. So just essentially a big shout out to everyone who was involved with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Matt, I think you're next.
Sure. Yep. For the Monitor APM team, we've been working much closer with the quality team, starting some new testing initiatives in addition to the quad planning process. One big benefit that came out of this for this last milestone was that we did a major bug grooming effort. Now we have a much cleaner backlog. So I appreciate the work that Sophia and everyone did for that.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Chase.
Hi, hello. Let's see. We had much improved communication and I think just greater understanding of the status of issues, where things were at, and helped us identify some earlier blockers and places where bringing more people into the issue through this idea of asynchronous issue updates, sort of a small snippet inside the issue as progress is being made there. And other groups have described this, I think, in this meeting before, and other teams have used this as well. We did it as sort of like a pilot, sort of a trial for ourselves, and decided that we like it enough to keep it. So look forward to how this impacts our collaboration and efficiency as we go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Chase. And there's a link in the notes there to the async issue update in case anyone else wants to see what Chase's team is doing. Donald, I think you're up next.
Yep, thanks, Darby. Okay, so based off of a past retro, we determined that there'd be value in trying a shadowing program to improve understanding and collaboration. 13.1, Charlie instituted it by starting with the shadow of a product manager. Charlie and Keenan are actually piloting the program currently, and we're super excited to see how that goes.
Cool. Thanks for sharing this. I think shadowing programs are always really a great way to help build understanding and empathy across our team. So there's a couple of links here in this note if anyone else wants to check out what's going on there. I think Valerie, you're up next.
Thank you. I can't access the doc. I think too many people are in it, but I think this is one, I have a couple. I think this is one about planning, and it's kind of a follow-up to what Crystal was talking about. We have seen this from the UX department as well, where the collaboration has been so strong that it has really enabled us to get ahead and plan for not just the upcoming milestone, but maybe even 2 milestones ahead, which is really our sweet spot. And so I just wanted to highlight that, that seems to be working really well in certain groups. And we would love to be able to expand that out to all of our stages.
Great, thanks, Valerie. Crystal, I think you're up next.
Okay, so I think this one should have ended up in the what didn't go well, but I can give you a little bit of a preview here. With this one, we had the end of the milestone around the 15th. The team noticed a message in the announcements channel saying that this release was guaranteed to be an official release candidate. That caused a little bit of panic on our team because we couldn't tell if this was actually the final release candidate. You know, as we've been working through this kind of iteration process, we have a feature flag that gates everything so that we're always ready to ship. But the challenge there is that we have to validate everything, and then we have to remove the feature flag, merge the docs, and get all of this merged in during this very short time window between approximately the 15th to the 17th. So when we have multiple MRs in multiple issues and working across a couple of different teams, it can be pretty tricky to figure out if everything that needs to be merged is actually merged and verified before we go ahead and remove the feature flag. And so I know there's a larger issue out there where we're discussing some possibilities, but for this time, our team is going to try some time management improvements. And so we're going to give ourselves an early due date a couple days ahead so that we can have time to resolve all these differences.
Cool, thanks, Crystal. Valerie, you're up next. Sticky titles.
Thank you. Yeah, so we had a release for sticky titles, and I just want to highlight this because we have already received really good customer feedback on it. So sticky titles, if anyone's unfamiliar with it, that is where you're working on a really long issue and you're scrolling down and you're going through all of the commenting and you forget what the original topic was and you have to go all the way back up to the page. Well, sticky titles means that the title stays with you after you hit a certain portion of the page so that you can be very politely reminded what the topic was without having to go back up and then find your place again or hit the refresh button, which is, or the back button, which is what a lot of people were doing. So great work for everybody that worked on that. Our customers love it.
I will say I love this feature as well. I discovered it the other day and it's super helpful. Kyle, I think you have the next one.
Yeah, +1 on the sticky titles. I'll just add that in. I love that as well. I actually have the next two. Engineering productivity team implemented pipeline efficiency changes, which resulted in, I think it was about a 20% reduction in MR pipeline costs. So June was at 163 per pipeline, which is the lowest ever since we started measuring. I'm looking to continue that momentum going into Q3. The next item is, as we made the pipeline more efficient, we actually temporarily realized a spike in master broken. And the team did a really great job with corrective actions to help stabilize master and do preventative measures. It actually resulted in the highest success rate that we've had for master as well since we've measured 96%. So kudos to the engineering productivity team there.
That's awesome. Thanks, Kyle. Mac.
Hey, thanks. I have the next one. So we completed a corrective action from previous incidents by allowing security MRs to run full regressions. And this is also in line with the work that the EP team has been doing, but this benefits everyone. So I'm putting it here. Back to you, Darby.
All right, thanks, Mac. Jerome, I think you have the last item under going well.
Yeah, so this one was for efficiency. We recently switched over to Kanban. It's our first full milestone on Kanban instead of more of a milestone process. We noticed that our project management process and meetings are a lot more efficient. we no longer have a start and stop at the end of each milestone. And now it's more of a continuous flow. So if you have any questions about Kanban process and making that switch, feel free to ask me.
Thanks, Jerome. And there's a link in there in the notes to your handbook page too. All right, so let's move right into the what went wrong last month. And I think, Mac, you have the first item there.
Yeah, this is a spot that we are monitoring closely. We discovered that a few teams aren't being unified with how we plan testing around quad planning, though there's also some bright spots where we see engagement, and we started to measure this as well. There's a Sisense dashboard there. We'll be looking to drill down into each product groups in the future in the next iteration.
Okay, thanks, Mac. And Neil, you have the next item.
Cool. So yeah, this is within iteration, although it could be an efficiency as well. But within the secure group, we had a large feature that subsequently resulted in a large MR. With good intentions, our engineer had split that up into multiple MRs, but unfortunately they were reviewed in parallel, different reviewers, there's overlapping feedback, so it added a lot of complexity. And after a couple of iterations, albeit a couple of days, we decided to back up and go with just one big MR again. So it was an efficient way to approach this, but there was a lot of complexity going on. So, you know, the ideal solution would have been to back up all the way into implementation strategy land and break this thing down and, you know, iterate through multiple issues and just plan that from the get-go. But the big outcome here was that when we do end up in this scenario again, because it's going to happen, things definitely grow, that we'll make sure to raise this to the review committee first and get ideas from them first rather than just throwing a bunch of MRs their way.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Thanks, Neil. Tanya, looks like you have the next item.
Yeah, thank you, Darby. So the quality department worked with Giddily cluster in our reference architectures to test it out and prepare to make sure that the performance was good. We found that without distributed reads, we can't recommend this in the reference architectures until that's addressed. There's a link there with an issue, and I believe that that's set to go in the next couple of milestones. So we're looking forward to that.
All right, thanks, Tanya. Lindsay, I think you're up next.
Hi. Yeah, we had one situation, at least one situation in Defend where we struggled to understand the end-to-end testing at GitLab. So we've got a lot of new engineers on our team. So we're working to improve our knowledge within our group of how the end-to-end tests work and also build a stronger relationship with our stable counterparts in quality to avoid that in the future.
Cool, thanks, Lindsay. Darva, you're up next.
Thanks, Darby. So we've been noticing towards the end of the release that we have a lot of deliverables that we're trying to get over, and we run into a bottleneck when we have one tech writer to service all of our needs. So we're going to schedule a meeting with the tech writer and see how we can work better with technical writing and just get some feedback from them, because they've been working really late and doing everything they can to support us, and we want to be good team members and support them well.
All right, thanks, Darva. Now on to the how we can improve section. And it looks like Stephen, you're up.
Yes, sir. Continuing on with the Petroni theme for last month, one of the things that we learned during this big change was that sometimes breaking things down seems like a good idea, but in the end may end up increasing the amount of time that it takes to complete it. We had a few different occasions where the MRs were really large. It took time for reviewers to get up to speed. We had gone through and broken things down as much as we could, but in the end, there was still a lot of context for every reviewer to look at before they could effectively make any suggestions. We did have an iteration meeting on this. We've come up with some ideas to try next time, including things like packaging up the binaries ahead of time. Working on the configuration stuff separately so that the scope is a little bit smaller for the reviews. That's it.
Great. The next item is from Cheryl, and she's not here today, so I'll talk about it real quick. This is basically around creating rollout plans for feature flagged issues or features. We ran into some challenges in the CI group around this, and so we're actually using this feature flag rollout template that Michelle pointed us to structure this in a little more organized way. So this is, we're trying this in 13.2, and I've actually tagged this as a follow-up item for the next retrospective. And over to Donald.
Thanks, Darby. Okay, we've sometimes failed to create a clear shared understanding of requirements on issues that involve multiple disciplines. The result is an engineer is left blocked without the necessary changes to proceed. We're still discussing ways to improve in an issue that John linked in the agenda, and we'll make sure to make updates to the handbook when we have suggestions from the team.
All right, thanks, Donald. Lindsay, I think you're up next.
Yeah, hi. This has come up a couple times within our group where an issue is shared in nature. So we've got front end and back end work encapsulated in one issue. And because the issue moves along in the workflow, either one side or the other misses that there's still work to be done there. So we're taking a new approach where we break things down into implementation issues and track things with our PMs using feature issues. So our diagram that's linked here has been updated to reflect that. And we're really jumping into that with our current 13.3 planning.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. Jean, are you available?
Yes, thanks, Darby. So in our retro, we discussed the challenge of iteration in product design, and specifically whether our product designer should be pushing forward the strongest design candidate for that meets the requirements of the feature, or whether they should iterate on their designs as well. We eventually settled that the product designer will push forward the strongest design candidate to meet the requirements, and it's then the team's responsibility to work with them to define how we iterate towards that end state. We don't necessarily need to meet all of the design criteria in the initial iteration, but it's important to collaborate with them on how we get there to still keep a good user experience in mind.
Great, thanks, Sean. I've heard a lot about iterative design recently, and I think this is a good thing to focus on. Craig, you're up next.
Yeah, so for context here, the database team is a relatively new team. I think we were formed late last year, and our last team member joined us only 3 months ago. So we noted in a couple of retros that some of the MRs that we had could have been further broken down. So we held an iteration retro and came up with some really great feedback. I think the simplest one that we took away was looking for "and" in the title. So if your MR title has the word "and" in it, you're probably doing too many things. So we have implemented that rule, and we're going to take that one forward. And we have a lot of other really good ideas on MRs. So you can take a look at our notes there. We have a really good summary in there.
Nice. That's a good call out to use an iteration retrospective anytime if you feel like you're not being iterative enough. We're getting tight on time, so we'll try to rush through these last few. Darva, you've got the next one.
All right, thanks, Darby. So we've modified our process for triage. Instead of just the triage email going to myself and the other EM and PMs, it's going out to the entire team, cutting out the middle person, myself, and giving the teams more autonomy to work on the triage. Thanks.
Great. CZ?
Thank you, Darby. There were feedback in our team about how we can better use the epics. Thanks to John, our PM, who has been helping us to better organize the planning by closing the deprecated epics, consolidating epics and issues, linking issues under epics. So by doing this, we can also dogfooding our own roadmap features. So you can see from the link that our roadmap is being shaped up. Yeah, so it's still an ongoing effort. We'll try to stick to this planning process in the future. Thank you.
Great, thanks, CZ. And Jerome, you have the last one.
Yep. One improvement that we'd like to make is improving our experiment tracking process. Currently, there's a delay where if we want to track some events, we need to wait for the data team to be able to import those fields into the data warehouse. We're looking at ways which we can speed up this process. So that's one which we're going to dive into a bit more.
All right, great. Thanks, Jerome. Thanks, everyone, for sticking a little bit late on this one. Last thing I'll call out is there is a rating system that we put at the bottom of this meeting, it's the agenda. It's called a ROTI. So it's a return on time invested. There's a link to a Google form there. So go ahead and put your feedback in. And thanks again for joining, and everyone have a good day.